guess we're gonna get this going. There might be a few more straggling in, but we'll get started. We want to start out, thank everybody for coming. We've got a good crowd tonight. We'll go over a few things, and then got a couple announcements, and we'll get to our main event. So, as I said, we've got our announcements. We do have a Breeders' Award Program update. And of course, I'm sure you guys know, we've got our two guest speakers, Sean Peck and Tanner Kesterson. I'm sure you know one if not both, and seen the faces plenty. So
hey, Tanner's on a top-notch live stream now.
Yeah,
He's famous.
Yeah, some kind of bitch is.
We've got upcoming celebrities. We've got our species profile, and then of course our attendance raffle drawing at the end. So for our banner contest this month, we had.
Okay. Did you want to say that the tank is part of the?
It's in this one.
Oh, never mind. I apologize.
In the banner contest, we had Derek Wheaton that won the photo. It's a very stunning picture. I think all of us agree that that was pretty awesome. For those that don't know, we have a banner contest every month on the group. All you do is share your picture in the comments of the post we make, and whoever gets the most likes gets to be the banner for the month, excluding anybody that's won within the year. So if you win, you got 1 year until you can win again, just so that we can get a little variety in. Our next meeting is going to be Bruce Yates. He's a breeder of guppies. Got a pretty good name in the community. I know a few people are excited about that. Let's see. I think there was something else in here. Oh, one thing, that's right, we didn't write down, but we wanted to bring up is, so we're coming up on running out of a little bit of merch, and we're looking into what we want to put our next money into. So if you don't know, we don't charge for memberships. The only thing we run the club on is donations and merchandise, and all the money goes back into the club to fund the next project or whatever. So if anybody has any inputs or thoughts on what they'd like for us to invest in, or what you might be interested in, any events, merchandise, anything like that, we're about to come up to our next time where we're going to be buying something. And I guess maybe it's not on this one, but it was supposed to be written in this one, I thought. Anyway, I'll go over it just in case. We're giving away a 9-gallon Fluval Flex. They're going to be doing a tag team Aquascape on it. Sean's going to be doing the Hardscape, and Tanner's going to be doing the planting. So it's pretty awesome, big deal. You know, I'm sure everybody's psyched about it. And with that, we've got a few things that we want to go over with the BAP community. Cassandra is going to go over a few of the rule changes and answer any questions if anybody's curious on the changes in that. I can figure out how to do this. Let's see. So Cassandra, if you want to go ahead and come up here. I'll fumble through this computer. There we go.
The points were updated on the previous slide. So the biggest changes we made were the points. We decided the points were taken from much larger clubs and people who were a lot more experienced breeders than some of the people in our club. So we decided to adjust everything to make it fit our smaller group, and for people to encourage people who may not have bred that many species to be able to participate. So every species now is going to be worth 1 point, and we've adjusted the point levels. Let me see if I can scroll down here. Oh, it's not on the screen. So we've adjusted the point levels too, so that for the first tier going up from intro, you'll only need to breed 5 species or get 5 points. So that makes things a lot more accessible. For people who aren't familiar, this is going to be an in-person kind of thing. So the forms, the entry forms, when you breed something, will need to be filled out and handed to somebody on the BAP committee in person here. And there's also a $10 entry fee in order to fund the awards at the end of whatever we decide to end on. So, questions? Okay, this is it.
Awesome. Thank you.
if you have any questions later on, you can always get with one of us and we can get a hold of the back community. If you're curious on a fish or what you need to do in the next step, just feel free to ask. With that, we're gonna go ahead and turn it over to our main men so they can get going. Oh, we.
That's me. That's me.
Hi y'all, how you doing? Is it hot? It's hot. Hot as heck. So, Fluval sent me this tank and I was gonna set it up for the Aquaticon, but I ended up with a different tank to set up there, so I thought I'd bring this in and set it up for you all here, and someone will take it home. We are gonna fill it up with water and stuff, so that the plants die before we get done, and we don't have to rush through. We're gonna fill it up with water and then we'll drain it. And I have these things here. Whoever wins it, we'll play it by ear. Let me know how safe you feel. Like we can drain it to any level in here and then you can take it home. I also have these jugs. I'd like the actual jugs back, but I can I'm happy to fill them full of water if you don't have tank water ready at home or whatever. So I don't imagine anybody's in that scenario. But so let's get started. So I've made a few samples here of things I've used, except for the powder, obviously, because it's a mess. But I'm gonna hand these around as I guess I'll do that as I add them in. And let's start all the way at the bottom.
Sorry, I was gonna hand them out for you.
Oh. Record some of this too. So what we have here is this is basically powdered laterite. This is red clay. That's or laterite is not exactly red clay, or maybe it's a form of red clay. You know, I don't either. So, but it is bacteria like the red clay powder at the bottom, and I generally put it to kind of feed the bacteria at the very bottom of the tank where there's no oxygen, or it's going to be a very low oxygen scenario. And also, the iron is especially good for plants with a lot of red in it. I believe Tanner's putting a few things like that in there. You don't have to go crazy with it. People that do, okay.
Go crazy with it.
You can go crazy. See, this is fine. We're just going to knock this around a little bit and spread it about. This is kind of a constant source of iron, like a long-term source of iron trapped in the bottom layer. So what's going to happen is your plants will grow, those roots will eventually hit the bottom and they'll start sopping up these other things. The other thing I'm going to put in here is a little bit of aragonite. Aragonite is crushed coral and it sort of evens out the pH. I find that especially when I'm using soil substrates, which are not inert, that means when you add water to it, you're going to get sort of a chemical reaction that's going to lower the pH, and then this kind of brings it back the other way. Again, long term. I don't put a lot in, it's just a little bit. And I got this as advice from another planted tank guy a long time ago, and just started doing it. And honestly, I like to think it's doing something, but I'm not sure. I've had success without it or with it, but why not add it if you have it around to add? And this is aragonite, if you want to pass it around. The next thing I'm going to put in here is, see, I've got a bag. So this is fluorite dark. And actually this bag is full of broken up Dragonstone that I'll be, that's the rock I'm going to be using the Hardscape with. We'll pass a little bit of that around too. Dragonstone's a really interesting, very porous rock, super dramatic. Anytime you want to do an aquascape and someone just go, wow, what kind of rock is that? Use Dragonstone. And it's inert, so it doesn't cause any pH fluctuations or anything. One thing to note is when it's new, a lot of times it's just chock full of mud. So you really want to rinse it out really good before you stick it right in your tank. I've made that mistake too. Yeah, it's really cool. And what's great is if you have like a really huge piece, you can just hit it with a hammer. Like I put it inside this bag and just beat it with a hammer and we'll see what comes out. Not very artistic to pick it that way, but much more natural. All right. So this is the fluorite dark. You absolutely must pre-rinse it. Like you'll see, because it's on a spotlight, it's still dusty. I'll rinse this for maybe 20 or 30 minutes. We'll see how dusty it still is. This is a really thick, crunchy substrate. It's a lot cheaper than the soil-based substrates like Amazonia is like the real high end, and maybe the Fluval stratum and stuff, maybe a little bit lower on the list as far as popularity and stuff. It's a little tricky because this tank's a lot smaller than I'm typically working. But I put a good healthy amount all the way around the bottom. And this provides long-term nutrition. And the way clay works is it sort of encapsulates things as they come through, and it holds them there so the plant roots come in there and then they tap into it. It also is a nice planting medium, like it's really nice to plant in. One thing with the flora is it has a sort of a bottom drain there. And I usually fill up right to the edge of that. You have to be sort of careful you don't go over it a whole lot with anything that could clump and like really block them. But a lot of times if you take loose rock, like stuff like this, water goes right through it. All right, there's kind of two ways to do it at this point. One way is just to leave it. Some people like the layers. The other way is just to kind of grab that very gently and pull it back. Just a little bit and be real gentle so I don't scratch the glass up. Just kind of make some space. And sometimes when you do it this way, then the whatever you put on top is going to kind of fall over to the front, and you'll have a nice kind of clean look. And this stuff will be like a little secret sauce down underneath. Okay. Now, a lot of times with aquascaping, something that's a lot of people say is to arch it up into the back. And that does work, but unfortunately what I've found that over time it's all going to go flat anyway. So I just start there. I just start with it flat.
If you wanted to keep it layered, like have different layers, what would you put underneath it to keep the layers so it doesn't all go flat this way?
You can put sometimes supporting structures in here, like you could silicone little walls and stuff to keep it from eventually pushing forward. You could also take each of these layers and put like a weed mat in it or something that would kind of maybe keep the top stuff from intermingling too much with the other. If you get real aggressive with your gravel back, you could potentially pull it up though.
Yeah, with some mesh bags, you can put rocks and stuff in to make little bags and back.
Yes, there's all kinds of stuff, ways to kind of cheat, like lava rock inside of bags and stuff to kind of put under there. And it's not such a bad thing to have a really porous element underneath if you've got enough room. This tank is so small that if we threw much more under it than this, there wouldn't be anything left to aquascape in. But yeah, I have seen, like, especially if you want to build up big areas and let the really kind of ride up, they'll just take a bunch of lava rock and put them in those porous bags and stuff. Or something cheap and inert.
You can take pieces of plastic and put them staggered, like if you want a hill, start small, a couple inches back, put another piece of plastic, a couple inches back, put another piece of plastic, where it covers that plastic level, but it will keep your shape over time.
What I'm going to do too here on the top is an Aqua Soil. This was given to me like out of the commercial packaging, so I'm not exactly sure. I think I know which one it is, and there'll be a link. I'm going to share a link with the club notes and stuff for this. You'll see it on Facebook or something with all the stuff that I've used today, and so you'll be able to find it if you want to look at it later. But this is I think this is just called Aqua Soil, which is such a generic thing. You can put it in just straight out of the bag. It is dusty, especially this one. It's kind of the bottom of the bag. I'm going to stop it up right there. That's magic dust that grows plants. I'm doing a really thin layer. I'm going to add more than this, but I kind of wanted to get it started. Let's see where I'm at. All right. This stuff does grow plants. I don't think it lasts very long. This combination is what I used on like my Mega Flex. This has been a real successful tank of mine. And over a long period of time, like 4 years, it's still going. I don't think the stuff on top lasts more than a year, maybe 2 years. So if you do all your substrate in that, then you might have short-term gains that are incredible because it's really well fertilized. The soil-based stuff has got a lot of fertilizer in it. It also will really, really alter your pH and bring it down, which is good for some things and not so great for other things. But the plants really like it. And it's real loose, so the plants can let it, once they have runners, can go all through this stuff just like it's sand. But it makes it harder to plant in. Sorry, Tanner. Because the plants want to pull right out of it too. This is just a little bit more of the same stuff. Okay, I think I went too far. Let's see. I'll go ahead and build it up towards the back. Now you see I've covered this thing, but it'll be all right. I like to just kind of start with a nice even little surface there. Okay, so now I'm going to add some, let's do the fun part, which is adding Hardscape with big rocks. This is too big a rock. The trick with a lot of hardscape is to, usually you want to do like what they call a mother rock or something that, this isn't, I don't know if this is quite big enough to be a great example of that, but it's, start off with kind of your keystone and then you want to put little subordinate things off from it. And you want to do it so that you have, you want to do things in threes. Our brain wants to do real symmetrical stuff. If you fight that a little bit, you'll come up with something a little bit more interesting, and it's all just kind of a rule of thirds. So I imagine the flow of the water, and this, of course, biomechanically is going to be coming this way. So I like to kind of point things in the flow. You'll see this Dragonstone. It's going to shift a bit. We're going to add some water in here in a second, and these will move around some more. So I'm just kind of getting a rough idea of what I got here. Maybe I should use that big piece. Let's see what it looks like. Might be too big. I should have maybe whacked this one with a hammer one more time. Hello. That makes a statement, doesn't it? There we go. That's a little too big. I'm just gonna lean it. Maybe we'll go this way. Oh, you got some more too. I think this will work. Thanks. So what we'll do here. All right. So essentially we're making a wall. And we got another one that's kind of large, but not quite the same. And we're going to point this out that way. It's just even and then odd. This one's used. You get some free Java moss. Whoever wins this, let me know if it comes back to life. You can't kill it, is my estimation. I think this is too little. I like it better. And you can look at, there's a lot of different aquascaping options as far as the hardscape. You got different kinds of wood, you got different kinds of rocks. One thing they all have in common are these lines that are developed. Now, sometimes they're layers and striations of compressed clay over time with some different kinds of rocks or just a pattern. If you can keep them. Now, in nature, nothing's perfect. But like I said, you see how it's kind of going in a direction. If you can keep these lines all going in a different direction versus maybe something like that, like if you get them like crisscross too much, it's just less visually appealing. I like to point things where they go. Now I'm doing my best to kind of place these in a neat way. What's going to happen in a few seconds is I'm going to pour water in here and these are just going to fall over. So keep that in mind. This is like to give you a loose idea. That's why when I did this at the show a few months ago, is completely cheating. Because this is barely halfway through an aquascape. What I'm going to attempt to do now is pour water in here in a way I've never done before. I'm sure it's going to be great.
You need help with that?
Maybe, we'll see.
Okay.
What's cool about these things is they have this back plane. I pulled the filter material out of here. I'll let whoever wins this take it home and pull it out or decide what they want to use in here. So it's just going to have the sponge. And I have all the cords out. Okay, yep. Now I have all the cords out. Thankfully, it's transparent, the back. Okay, everything's out of there, right? All right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put a little bit of water in. I'm going to try to just get it right at the top so it's like he can plant inside of a marsh. This is a lot easier to plant in if it's a little bit wet. And usually I will add a little bit of water because, like I said, all the rocks and everything will just kind of move. Everything's going to move as soon as we add water to it. So let's see here. I'm sure this is fine.
Yeah, adding that water just allows the plants, the roots to sort of grab in a little bit better than planting dry. And you're gonna have a lot more plants come up if you don't add just a little layer of water.
I wonder if there was something, oh, there it is. All right,
Every
go.
time the bathroom is straight back.
This is where you stall for time. Talk about your plants.
Yeah, if you're good with this, I'm gonna start showing some of these.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So I brought a kind of array of different plants. I didn't exactly know what Sean was gonna do. And by the way, I'm Tanner Kesterson. For those who don't know me, I'm from Nashville, but come to Knoxville from Knoxville, live in Nashville, come to Knoxville quite a bit. But so onto the plants. I brought some. These are potted in rock wool, and I want to try and replicate what you'll typically see if you're buying from the store. For those over here, it's just they're potted in rock wool. So I potted these up for my tank, and I'm going to show they don't really ever tell you how to get these plants out of the rock wool or if you need to take them out. I would always recommend taking the plants out of the rock wool, and the easiest way to do that is like if you've got a nursery pot that you get for your garden. They're plastic, so you kind of work them around like that, ease the rock wool out. You've kind of got this clump, and normally there's a seam, and you can just gently separate it, and then the roots that are in there, it normally just can pull out pretty easy. If that doesn't happen, another thing you can do is take your forceps or tweezers and sort of just scrape between the roots real gently. Because the most important thing when you're buying a plant from the store is the roots. Because a lot of times these plants are grown out of water, so their leaves are going to convert to their aquatic state. I don't have any that aren't converted yet, or I'd show you. I tried to find some today, but I could not. So I'm just going to keep, I'm going to pot all of these kind of the same way. While Sean's still filling that up.
Yeah, it's just about things are moving
So
too much.
just pull them apart, kind of try and be gentle. This one's got the roots normally ease out pretty good. If you've got some plants with larger root systems, they might really latch onto the rock wool. But,
What is that little plant you're doing?
oh yeah, sorry.
It's adorable.
This plant is Pogo stem and Helfrey. It's really cool. I guess I could, that pot's wet. I would pass it around, but I don't want to get water everywhere. But it's really cool. It's got little ruffled leaves. And it's interesting because most of the Pogo stem varieties are real long stem plants. This one will typically, if you trim it, it'll stay short and little. It's almost like a little bush. So I like using these as a foreground plant. Let's see. I don't have any in that tank that's pictured right there, but they're in the new tank, they're right in this area in the foreground. And that's another thing you want to kind of be aware of is how big do the plants get. You don't want to put, large growing plants in the front of your tank. You won't be able to see anything else. So I always like to go from, the foreground, midground, and background, have the tallest plants, like stem plants in the background. I typically have the hardscape towards the middle of the tank, similar to what Sean has done. And I will do Java fern, anubias, stuff sort of like that. Oh, awesome. Thank you. And then in the foreground, you can do smaller Crips, like Crip Harva is a good one. If you're running highlight and some decent, well, depending on what you want to do, you can run a carpeting plant. Monte Carlo is a good one for a lower lighting setup. It'll grow fairly slow. It grows better with weed. You can pull it apart. I'll plant it in 2 clumps like that. Well, it could be 3 or more, but I'm just going to plant it like this. And we'll do it that area. Got some floating down. It'll break and branch off, and little pieces will grow everywhere. But it's a very good. It's an easy, fast growing plant. I mean, it's called pearl wheat.
How tall does it get? How high will it get?
Really depends on if you trim it. I probably, it'll probably get this tall or so, maybe taller if you've got a really tall tank. But I'd normally keep it trimmed, and it'll almost, you can create like a bush with it, or I've seen some people use it as a carpeting plant as well.
If you really stay on it with the trimming, you can keep it low. And if you have a lot of light, it'll kind of go sideways. But it does grow wild, like it gets really bushy if you let it go.
I've seen it at least 18 inches tall.
Yeah, it could,
Wow.
it could go, if it's got enough light especially, it'll keep its form of the leaves all the way down too.
So with how I've got it planted thus far, if you look at it, most of this section, half of the tank is green plants. So what I'm gonna do is I wanna add a little variety and a little color pop. So I'm gonna plant the stem plant, the Ludwigia repens, or the Super Red Mini is the common name. It's got really vibrant leaves. It'll do well with that iron that is there. It's got kind of a delicate stem, small leaves, which will look good for the scale in a smaller tank like this. So when planting a stem plant, you just, the bottom, you grab it. I like to plant them anywhere from 3/4, half inch to 3/4 of an inch deep to let those roots really take hold. And they aren't gonna stand up yet because we don't have water in the tank, but y'all will be able to see the finished. See that finished? Oh, perfect. So here's a good example of what I was talking about earlier, where when you trim, it'll shoot out shoots at the node. That's the bottom of the plant is right there, and it's got 2 different shoots growing out of it, and it's got more branching off of the main stem. So we'll just grab that. But this is probably one of my favorite plants. It's a slower growing stem, but it just has the tips of the leaves and the plant gets really great red.
But if I lay down and I play dead and I stay dead.
But you always, when you're buying plants, the biggest thing, like I said earlier, you really want to make sure you have some really healthy roots, because that'll help the plant recover, when you transplant it. From their tank to your tank, the water's different, the substrate's different. A lot of times the stores just use them, they're in their holding tanks, they've been shipped in, so they're not very, they're kind of in a state of shock. So you want to give it a little bit of time to transfer and be healthy. These I'm not sure if I'll use, but these are Hygrophila pinnatifida. It's a really cool plant that has these kind of ruffled leaves. It gets really red under high lighting, and with lower nitrates.
Especially if you got iron in the very bottom of your.
Yes, that laterite will help quite a bit. There's a lot of iron.
There's extra iron in this one.
And then this is Mitch's favorite plant, Java fern.
5-gallon bucket, not my thing.
This is a epiphytic plant, so it's got I didn't bring a good one to see, but it's got a rhizome kind of that it runs along and the leaves come out of. And the rhizome, if you plant this in the substrate, it will more than likely rot. I've seen people grow it in the substrate, but it's not the most successful way to do it. So what I do in that scenario, or for these plants in like Bucephalandra, Anubias, is you can take a small piece of rock. These are the Dragonstone that Sean broke up, and then, would you hand me that glue? Sorry. Thank you, sir. And then you can use a cyanoacrylate glue. This one's the Flourish glue. I picked this up on the way over here. Normally I use just super glue, as long as it's cyanoacrylate, because that will cure inert in the water, and you won't have it won't affect your fish. It basically cures as a plastic. And you can just it's good to wet it because it sort of activates when it's in the presence of moisture. And I'll just put a little bit, well, if I can get it to come out.
You might have to open it first.
That's true.
Take the lids.
That's good. See, this is the first time I've used this.
I built a lot of models.
That's true. Yeah, we were over at Sean's thing. He's got some incredible models and tanks. Very good at planted tanks.
And model tanks.
Yes. But you can just take a little small dab of glue, hold that on there for 10, 20 seconds. It's probably already, I'm not going to pull on it, but it's probably already semi-set enough to be in the tank.
Are you focusing that glue on the rhizome, or?
I usually will use, you'll get your Java fern with these kind of the roots. Normally I'll just put a dab and the roots will adhere. And once, after a while it's been in the tank, the roots will actually just grasp onto the rock and hold pretty tight. And this is a cool example on the Java fern. So it actually grows plantlets out of its leaves. You can see here, this is a leaf coming out, and there's all these plantlets coming off of it. So the way to propagate that is you just simply pull that off the leaf, there you go, you've got a new Java fern. So I love it. This is one of the first plants I started out with. It's a lower light plant, and it's very resilient, but you can also grow it in higher tech setups, unless you're Mitch.
Said lies, all lies.
To save my life.
I've got too much of it.
It's a local water issue, I think.
You know, Java fern is a funny plant
Yeah.
because it is easy to grow, so kind of, unless you're Mitch.
Yeah.
But it loves CO2,
Yes.
and fertilizers and
Potassium.
stuff like that, and it will respond if you give it like the extra love. It's not a plant that you don't need, like necessarily
Yeah.
don't need to give it.
I have found that potassium Java ferns really like to use a lot of potassium. You'll see if you have enough, the tips of the leaves will actually get a little, not quite transparent, but they'll get a little almost clear. And it's very cool. That's one way that I've read that you can tell if you have enough potassium for the Java ferns.
Do they get like a neon green before they do that?
I haven't seen like a neon green. They get bright green.
That's what I do neon green. So
Um,
I'm thinking it's potassium.
So I'm gonna go ahead, like I said, I'm gonna use this as a foreground plant. It'll probably, grow up a little bit taller than this, but you can just trim it and replant the trimmings. Let's see. Oh, and then let me talk about the planting. I'm using just a pair of the tweezers or forceps. I like the curved ones so I can sort of plant it down like that. And the way that I plant is I'll grab the roots, push it down in the soil, and then slowly release and push until I can feel it's firm and holding down. And then I'll open the tweezers and just pull up, and the plant hopefully will stay down. But I'm gonna stick this guy right here. And another thing that my personal preference is to do sort of plants in groupings, not have them mixed entirely about. I mean, that tank on the bottom middle is mine. It's pretty wild grown, which I like, but I still like to have the plants in sort of sections. We'll stick that guy here.
Hopefully it's not too murky where we thought.
Front's a little bit, but it's not bad.
Maybe one of
And then another thing I like to do as well, and this is more of an aquascaping thing, if I've got, plants, one species of plants over here, I like to put, a small amount on the other side just to kind of give it some contrast and balance it out. I don't really necessarily want to do the same amounts on either side because like Sean was speaking about the symmetry, your eyes don't, it doesn't look natural. It's more of something we have created. But I'm gonna take this guy and he's gonna go right there. And you just sort of, you gotta grab the roots. Don't squeeze so hard that you crush the plant, but just sort of get it in there. And that's why it's good to have a fine substrate that the roots can really grab onto. It makes it so much easier for planting. Let's see. And then some of the other foreground plants that I brought are Crips. This is a Criptropica. They, I will say that they're a plant with a very big root system. This is basically a baby plant from one of my larger Crips, but it's already, I pulled this off of the parent Crip, and this was already the root system on it. And they like nutrient-rich soil, which is a huge thing because I think, like Sean was saying, setting up a tank to begin with lots of nutrients in the soil is a good way to be successful. I don't personally like to add a lot of nutrients to the water column. I feel like it makes the tank more susceptible to algae. If you can have all the most of the plants pulling their nutrients from the soil, it doesn't let the algae, sort of reach those nutrients.
It's hard to be consistent too when you're adding it manually.
Unless you have, like a automatic doser. I know I do not dose on a regular schedule fertilizers. If I see it, I'm like, oh yeah, let's dose a little bit, but definitely can't stick to a regular schedule.
Also, stem plants feed from their roots more than they feed from the water column.
Yeah.
So liquid fertilizers don't have as much of an impact on your stem plants as a proper soil substrate will.
And that's one thing, if you see that you have stem plants and they're starting to shoot out roots from the stem above the soil, that's meaning that they're not getting enough nutrients from the soil itself, so they're trying to send roots into the water column. And to fix that, you can just simply take a root tab and stick it up under the plant in that area. Root tabs are basically just mini chunks of fertilizer. There's a lot of different brands. I don't have a particular favorite, but let's see.
Would you trim the aerial roots after that? Like, is it okay to trim those?
Yeah, it'd be okay to trim them. Normally, if I get my stem plants doing that, they'll let the leaves where the roots are coming out will start to sort of come off. And at that point, I will just trim, pull the base out, the base of the stem plant out, and replant the tops. That's a good way to keep your stems looking really healthy and full of leaves, because eventually that older growth on the bottom, really no matter what you do, it'll get shaded out once you have all the growth at the top of the tank. So every so often, you can normally get about 4 trims out of a stem, because it'll just, most stems, depending on where you trim, they have the nodes, and you trim a node like on, let's see here, yeah. So this is the Super Red Mini Natins, and these are the tops trimmings that some of them are rooted, but wherever the leaves come out is a node. And so if you trim above that node and leave the node, most stem plants will shoot out 2 new shoots. And so you can keep doing that and it'll kind of branch almost like a tree. But it gets to a certain point when that main stem can only produce, transport so much nutrients to the other stems. So they'll start to get a little unhealthy. At that point, I trim the tops, take the main stem out, and replant. But I need to finish the foreground. I'm taking forever, sorry. So pretty much I've just got a couple more Crips I'm going to be putting kind of dotted around. Crips are one of my favorite plants. They can be low or light. They don't necessarily, they're heavy root feeders, but they are great. You'll see this has got a big root system, so I'm just trying to bury the most of that. And one thing with Crips, most of the ones you buy in the store, they will have been grown immersed, and their leaves have to convert. If you've done planted tanks, you've probably heard of Crip melt. They're one of the most common plants that once they convert, they'll just melt, lose all the leaves, and that's okay as long as the roots are good. Normally, they'll start sending out more of the aquatic, the converted leaves. So now I'm just going to finish up with the Java ferns in sort of the middle areas of the tank. Glue a couple more pieces on, and the reason I like to glue them on rocks is because they're not stuck in a specific spot of the tank. If they're not doing good in one spot, you can just pick up this rock and move it. It's a lot easier to move.
Or if you need to clean algae off of it
Yes.
or whatever, you can pull it all the way out.
Yes, sometimes in my tanks this is primarily how I do it. I'll pull them out every so often and just look them over, take the dead leaves off, and I don't have to be, in the tank to do it.
How would you recommend cleaning algae off?
It depends on what type of algae. Some of that harder algae, you can almost just rub it off with your fingers. String algae, I like to take a toothbrush and just very lightly, kind of brush the leaves almost.
Cotton candy style.
Yeah, and just wrap and twist. Some of the algae are really difficult to get off, like, the blackbeard algae. Staghorn is one that I struggled with for a while, and typically with that, I'll spot dose hydrogen peroxide. Be careful with that. You can dose too much and it'll kill the plants. But if you just take, a little pipette and do a little squirts all wherever the algae is, you should see it start bubbling. And depending on what type of algae is, the blackbeard algae will turn red after you give it a hydrogen. That's how you know it's dying. And it'll fall off. Your cleanup crew will eat it, and then you'll be good to go.
It kind of turns red and then it'll turn white when it's really about to, and then it just kind of falls off.
Yeah, it's cool. I've got some videos on my phone where I spot dose, and you can just see a stream of bubbles coming up from where that hydrogen peroxide is reacting.
So would you spot dose and just take it right back in the tank, or rinse it first, or?
Normally, hydrogen peroxide is just H2O2, so it basically just dissipates into hydrogen and water. It can hurt I believe it can reduce oxygen in the tank, so you just want to be careful with that. But it dissipates pretty quickly in water.
I have killed fish
Yeah.
dosing peroxide.
I'm normally, if I can take the plants out, I'll take them out of the tank and make a little diluted hydrogen peroxide bath, leave them in there for a little bit, and then it's probably always good to rinse them off.
And it only really seems to work on the blackbeard algae. Like it doesn't, I haven't seen it work on like the green hair algae or anything.
Yeah.
But I've tried it both ways, with a pipette, just squirting it on the different affected areas and pulling the plants out and soaking them in it and adding it straight to the tank. If you're real careful, you won't have a lot of problems. I didn't have any deaths or anything when I did it, but I imagine you could always go too far, right? Somebody somewhere.
There's also a product, Excel, that is, it's called liquid carbon, but it's not. It's just an algae.
Yeah, Excel is a glutaraldehyde, and it's basically a medical grade disinfectant.
Yeah.
From what
It's
I've
not good
read,
for you.
don't get it on your skin or your eyes. I wouldn't
But put it in
recommend that. But yeah, put it in. That can be also used as, I like to use it as a spot treatment instead of just dosing the whole tank.
What that does is it kills off, it does create carbon, but it does it by killing off a layer. And the reason, spot? Okay. And the reason you see the bubbles and stuff from it is because it's eaten off the top layer of your plants. So that's not like the CO2 oxygen kind of bubble. It's more like when you trim a plant in half and you see little bubbles come up. It's more like that. So it is an algae side more so than liquid carbon or whatever. Although they had a French guy come over to the aquarium and talk about it and I struggled to understand what he meant, but apparently it's like it kills off this layer and that dead material turns into a form of carbon that the plants can.
So while these Java ferns, I put them in a little too early, they're not done curing yet, I'm going to start planting the mid to background of the tank. This plant is pearlweed. You can grow it as a stem plant. If you trim it, it'll carpet and spread out. It's a very fast growing plant, and when I'm setting up a new tank, I like to have a couple fast growing plants because you can have nutrient spikes in the beginning, and the fast growing plants just kind of help stabilize that out until the rest of the plants can catch up to speed and start growing. So I'm just going to plant this. I'll probably do it and that's the thing with pearl is just stuff wrapped around it. You'll want to take that off. I just wrap filter floss around it with a rock. You can just drop it down in there, but what'll happen is the stems themselves won't get enough flow at the base, and they can rot. So I'm got those taken apart, and then I will plant those as background plants. They can grow very tall, but as long as you keep them trimmed, it's the same thing with the super red. It will stay shorter.
I left a little space behind that big rock
I
too.
think that's where I'm going to go with that.
Yeah, okay. Sometimes it's cool with your hardscape to create a little bit of a barrier, and then it just makes the transition from one type of plant to another type of plant a little bit more interesting and give it a little bit of depth.
Yeah, because what you could do if you were really wanting to make this look, the tips of the Rotala look the best, you could trim it in a line with the hardscape to where just about that much of the plant is coming up over the rock, and you just have a lot of color right there.
Especially when it's grown out, when it gets really tall and close to the light, it turns really, really red. And that's when you cut it halfway off, pull the other.
That's one of the more red. This is all the same type of plant, but this one was growing up really close to the light, so it got really red. It might be too tall. No, we're fine. Same thing with the other stems. I'm planting them not terribly close to each other, about a ½ inch. I mean, you can plant closer if you want. I just think it's a little bit better to give them some room because they will send out their own shoots from the base and just provide so you can get some light down there so the bottom leaves do not die off. Oh. I planted that one upside down.
They'll still grow.
They will grow. It's pretty funny, and you can let them just basically float, and they'll send out, through the entire stem, they'll send out little short plants.
Yeah, you can even take those bottom parts that you've pulled out, throw them in the top of another tank and come back in a couple of weeks and you might even have another little set of it just floating around at the top.
And something that I would do, you know, if you're on a budget, you can't buy many plants, you can take a stem plant and cut this in half and then get 2 plants. And that's just another way to make it go further, because getting good plants can be pretty exciting. I mean, it's not a cheap venture setting up a planted tank. You can do it inexpensive, but that's just another way to make your dollar go further.
Or something if you join your local aquarium club that gives away plant
Yes.
trimmings every month at their meetings.
Yeah, all of these plants and everything except for these Crips I picked up today, all of that came from pretty much that tank right there. So it's always nice to be able to, you know, have the extra plants. And I don't know if these will fit.
Maybe drop it right in the corner.
That's another, when you're planting the tanks, you know, I brought a lot of plants and I did not know where I was going to put half of them. I think that would be a good spot. This is Crip spiralis. It's another type of Crip, has a heavy, it's a heavy root feeder, but it has these really thin leaves. They get a little bit of ruffling on them and they sort of will just grow and spread out over the tank. It's a really, it adds some fine details to the tank, which is nice. And with larger roots like this, I'm just going to plant this with my hand. So it'd be a little bit easier.
There's that many roots, it's hard to get all of them down. with
Yeah,
fingers.
and what I normally do if I'm doing that, if it's a tank like this that we're setting up and it's on an existing tank, I'll just make a little, kind of like you're planting a plant outside, just dig a little hole and then put the roots down in there and cover it back up. Let's see. Got one more Java fern to add. Maybe not. But that's the nice thing with having these on the rocks is, it's in there now, but if you find that it's too crowded, takes up too much space, you can just pull it out really easily. And I think that will probably be all. Sean, what do you think?
Yeah,
On
yeah,
this.
looks great.
Should I add any more?
No, I think that looks really good.
I almost fit all of them in there.
Let's see what happens when we put water in.
Yeah.
So there's one last thing I do when I get to this stage, and that's these decorative. This is just Stony River Premium Aquarium gravel. So what happens is, with the tank being new and before these plants grow in, it's just kind of this stark black scape through there, and a lot of people don't like that. So if you want to add some color, these rocks are really similar in color to this, so they don't stand out too much. I've got plenty of rubble too, and you can very easily just kind of take your rubble, these little tiny pieces, and sometimes I'll go in and I'll kind of stick them near the bases of these plants that are likely to come out. Let me see if I can get to the bottom of it here. Yeah. Adding a few of these rocks might be the difference between this floating out when you finally fill it up or not.
And then one thing I like to do as well, like we've done here, is plant heavily from the start. It gives you a better chance of beating algae, which is, if you've got a planted tank, that's probably your number one fear, is coming home and seeing it just covered in algae. If you plant heavy from the beginning, it really helps. It basically doesn't give enough room for algae to take hold. Because algae is everywhere, but it's just the quantity of it that you're seeing, and it depends if you give it the right conditions to take hold.
Are there any particular plants that you guys have found that fish that like to eat plants don't like?
It really depends on which fish.
Gotcha.
Jungle cow, nothing eats jungle cow.
Sword plants.
Really, when you've got a fish that'll eat plants, and I'm not too terribly experienced in this, but the thicker the leaves, the harder it is for them to eat the plants.
The Anubias are usually.
Anubias are good.
like sword plants.
Like I've heard hornwort.
I find Java ferns the most delicious plant. But on the opposite end of that spectrum, John Fern's always the first to get.
Really? I typically keep primarily all planted. Well, all my tanks are planted, but I keep smaller fish that won't. I like to make sure they won't eat my plants because I love the plants.
Another little piece of advice, I grow plants in a goldfish tank. If anybody knows goldfish, just love to eat and rip up plants. I feed green beans, French style green beans once a week. Kind of keeps the craving down, if you so.
Duckweed,
Yeah, I found that helps quite a bit.
Do you do it like out of a can?
I just.
Do you rinse it off or?
No, I don't even rinse it off.
Kroger
now.
sells,
Make
I
sure
just-
you get the saltless one.
Yeah,
Kroger
yeah.
sells a saltless green
Yeah, I
bean.
just get the.
They might want.
I use them with mystery snails.
I
I
like-
love them. They just rinse them off and drop them down in there and there's a party.
Wow.
Another thing y'all can do if you've got like duckweed or a floating plant that just grows like crazy and you've got too much and nothing to eat it outright when it's alive, bag it up in Ziploc bags, put it in the freezer, and then you can, there's recipes you can look up and turn it basically into a veggie food for your fish. Shrimp love it, plecos, if you got plecos, they love that. I know you've got some plecos that, yeah, they would love, I've been feeding that. It's almost like, if any of you keep snails, it's called Snello. It's kind of like a Jello based. You can add that to it and get some good veggies going.
I want to play with power.
Yeah, with the green beans, just like she mentioned, try to get the unsalted. I just buy the cheap store brand French style green beans because the slivers are a little bit easier on them. And I don't rinse them out, but it definitely wouldn't hurt to. I have a 210 gallon tank, so
There's more
much throwing off. So I just drain the juice out.
Thank you. Yeah, I saw those roots pulling up. I was like, no.
If you use the frozen green beans, you can partition it out easier. You can portion it out. You can just go in your freezer, grab a bag out, throw a handful of it in, throw it back in the freezer. Then open it again and have to eat the whole can. Pour in the filter.
I've been really on my
Oh,
yeah.
Come right back in the morning, it's not a single
It's still maybe. I don't want to overplant. I should have to grow in.
I always like to leave it a little bit around.
I'm a maximum.
I've lost one, but it's not bad.
Oh man, that's not bad. Only one, two. Okay. Normally that happens.
Already eating it. It's easier to get
Thank you for sending me that article.
You're welcome. Hey, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. I appreciated that.
Yeah, that website is great. There's so many myths about fish keeping and stuff, and that's like a very non-commercial, just straightforward information.
Science and studies, and that's kind of neat. Yeah, that was kind of good to hear. So, and they did. They're fine so far.
Good.
They're kind of checking up a new dig. So
Nice.
So I did try some of those leaves. My pH is on the tap really low.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know if I should play with the leaves or not right now. I'm just kind of letting them settle in because I don't want to add one more.
I know you'll be fine. Yeah. Stability is much more important.
And I screwed that up. I was trying to raise my pH with some chemicals I bought.
The aragonite that they use will actually raise your pH a lot.
Do they have
It buffers the water up to an 8, about an 8.2. If you use a lot of it,
They have launched.
it will raise the pH.
Because if you get one going, you're going to have pH kills, right?
Two or three are owned because they were just sucked the new.
Yeah, it's out of my tap, my pH is
Pretty far away from.
and my pH is pretty big.
I pulled, I recently redid my top line.
Maybe on different days, it'd be
One of the
different
red
days. When I
fire.
first got it, on my tank, I was testing it all in the tap water.
Can I get everybody's attention? While they're filling that up, we're gonna go ahead and go over the species spotlight for today, and then we'll get to the giveaway after that. You guys wanna go ahead and give them a round of applause? I think
I don't know how I got picked for this, but I did. They're so gracious to give me everyone's favorite plant to talk about. So, floaters, like duckweed and frogbit, salvinia, all of these are actually really useful plants that nobody likes, but they are useful. They have their benefits, and sometimes people ask, where does duckweed come from? I'm convinced there's like this troll that moves around in the middle of the night and shows up to pristine tanks and just drops one in, because that's what happened to me. It just showed up one day, and now I have way too much. But there are some benefits to them. They use up a lot of nutrients, which can also be one of the reasons why people hate it too. It can outcompete a lot of plants too. One of the pluses to that is they outcompete algae a lot of times. So they will help with your maintenance on your tank, give you a little bit of a buffer on when you need to, we do water changes to pull nitrates out, give you a little bit of buffer there, and so that's useful. I think they look cool. Honestly, I like the way it looks. That pond, that mini pond in the middle is, it was covered not long ago, and I cleaned it out. That was after I cleaned it out, about a week. You can see it already filled back in, and today there's only about this much space. So it grows very, very quick. Now some fish, cichlids will eat it. A few others, I'm not really sure. I don't have anything that will eat it, unfortunately.
Barbs, goldfish.
Yeah.
Okay. So there are some species that'll eat it, so you can use it as food. I know there's different ways to make snello and stuff like that and feed it, and so that's cool. You don't have to do anything to propagate it. It just keeps growing. It just keeps coming, and it never stops, and you can never get rid of it. So if you ever decide to allow it to grow in your tank, just know this is a lifelong commitment. That tank will always have duckweed. I mean, I've heard of people completely tearing one down, everything out of it, build it back up, and duckweed's there somehow. And I think even if it dries out, it'll come back once it's wet. I think. If not, someone's played a sick joke on me. And you get some that, like the red root floaters, that look really good underneath. And so what's cool about those is, they're on the surface, so in your tank you might not really get a good view of them. But the roots can go down pretty deep and they can get pretty dense, and it's really cool looking. It's a great place for fry. They look great in a pond. I highly recommend them, but I also tell you, don't do it unless you really want to. Because I really wish I didn't have them, even though I love them. See, it's a love-hate relationship with this plant. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, if I could scare you off of them, and I don't want to, but I'm going to try, is when you put your arm in your tank, you are going to come out with a sleeve of duckweed every single time.
And your hair, if you're a girl, I will tell you how much duckweed has been in this hair. You go out in public, you go to get your groceries and there's duckweed in your hair. You need like a beta sorority to help with your duckweed.
There you go.
Our beta sorority, just like chomp.
Chomp side?
Yeah.
That's cool.
I never have, you always talk about how it just fills up everything so fast.
Yeah.
A beta sorority takes care of it for us.
My wife will come through and go, the tank's looking awful green. And it's not algae, it's just where it's got a nice layer of duckweed on it, and it just makes it look green. That's probably another downside to it. But it's beneficial. It'll eat up some nutrients. It'll help out with, it looks cool. I honestly think it looks cool, but it is so frustrating. So I can't recommend and discourage you enough about this plant. And there's some on the table if you decide you want to try it. And if you just want to take some and go set it on fire and burn it, I would recommend that too. You can do that. If you have any questions about floaters, we're here for that. I didn't think so. Don't.
Say floaters a few more times.
One of the things we do with floaters, we have a farm and we have chickens. And so a couple times a year I go out to my lily pond and we have duckweed and frogbit, and I just pull out giant clumps and throw it in the chickens. They don't eat it when right away, but once it dies, they love to eat it. Because duckweed and azolla is like 45 to 60% protein based on the type of small floater you have. So you can actually turn that around and feed it to your livestock. Maybe not cats and dogs, but chickens, birds, like you said, plecos. Right.
I'm pretty sure I've had it in my mouth. I don't think it's toxic.
No, you can eat it. People can eat it, and so you can actually take cookie sheets and take it out on your cookie sheet and just kind of leave it out in the sun to bake. We did that in
Do a
Arizona.
patty, make,
Yeah, we can make duck burgers. Hold
Hold on.
This
is getting crazy.
He's like, this is right.
I love it, that was great.
No, it's one thing I will say it's good for. I kept my whole room clean of it, and I've got a friend named Tanner, not this Tanner, a different one, and he so graciously blessed me with it, and now I can't get rid of it either. But the one tank I will purposely introduce it in is smaller tanks, like 5 or 10 gallons. One good thing, like he said, it eats up so many nutrients that you don't have to worry about a fluctuation of that. With the bigger tanks, it's not as much as an issue once you get established, but with a smaller tank, if you ever have any doubts, you can put a little duckweed in there and just don't transfer it over. And it does do quite the job of keeping it clean.
Yeah, it would have eventually made it to my micro pond, but I purposely put it there for that reason, because it's only 20 gallons, so I would have.
It's the only tank I purposely put them in. All right, well, while we're getting the last couple of things going here, I'm going to go over the raffle and how we're going to do this. So to make things easier, instead of doing 2 separate raffles for the tank and then the table, since we've all already got a ticket for the table, what we're going to do is just include that in our regular raffle. How it's going to work is we're going to holler out a number, and if we call your number, you can come up, you can pick the tank, and of course, we've got the table over too. So when I call your number, you can pick one thing, and then once you pick your one thing, what we ask is, you can take your time and make sure you get what you want. But once you know what you want, go ahead and move over, because there's quite a bit of us here, and we want to get the whole crowd through there.
And make sure you let the person in front of you choose first.
Right, simple rules, we all know how it works, but we'll call 2 or 3 at a time, and you can come up and say, we're on
I just need you plugging out.
Yes, thank you, thank you. So real quick, this, because we didn't have a slide for that. The 23rd, right?
Yes.
Okay, so when we first started, we had talked about trying to plan an outing for this year, and I think we've done a great job of meeting every month, and we've got some stuff planned for this year, but it just didn't work out for us to plan our own outing for like a collection event or something. Thankfully, Conservation Fisheries Incorporated is having an outing on the 23rd, July 23rd. I don't have the exact location of where it's at.
It's River Johns Island, it's just outside of Maryville. It's on our website, we'll post it in the group and everything.
Yeah, and we'll make sure that it's out there already. We'll make sure it's on the Facebook page, and then it'll be in the newsletter. I'll get it out in the newsletter as soon as possible. But it's going to be a great time. There will be some collecting, some snorkeling, some singing, and there will be food. Or bring your own food.
I think there will be dinner.
There will be food, but you can bring your own food. You can picnic, hang out. My family's planning on going. I think it would be a great thing for us to incorporate and to be able to have an outing that we didn't necessarily have to plan. So
I'll be out there with snorkel masks. We'll have a stain out there so we can catch our own fish. We'll have a little tank set up for fish that we catch so that we can look at them and stuff.
It'll be a fun time. If you have any more questions about it, see me or maybe Derek, and we'll get you what you need.
One last thing before we draw the numbers. We try not to drill it, but I'm bad for not reminding people either. If anybody wants a shirt or a sticker, you can talk to me, Mitch, JT, or Jason. Mostly JT handles it, but we've got a select number of size of shirts and plenty of stickers. But anyway. Let Sean pick the first one.
All right, so if this is your ticket and you want the tank, it's yours. If you don't, let us know and the next person will get it.
Also, I owe you a remote that turns on the light. Somehow I bought all of this, but not that.
Just the last 3 numbers.
Yeah, just the last 3.
All right, we got 686.
686.
Nice. Congratulations. There's another chance to get the tank, because I have too many tanks. I don't want that tank. It is a nice and glorious tank.
All right.
Next one.
He thought about it though, I saw it.
662.
662. Right.
Hey!
That's it. When is your birthday?
Monday.
Monday.
Happy birthday.
All right.
Big thanks to Sean and Tanner.
Yes, to be clear, this was donated to Sean, Sean donated it, and all the effort, and the Aquascape, and then Tanner did donate the plants.
Yeah, big thank you to them, because we don't have to say, you know how much it costs to set it up, so.
Is it for the taste of the taste? That's for every, however you guys want to do it.
Yeah, I was gonna say that too.
Well, with the thicker stuff on the bottom, it'll just kind of keep going forever. So it'll pick up when this leaves off. That's why I put the stuff lots longer at the bottom.
One announcement to be clear on the table. There's some Dragonstone up there in a bucket. Take three pieces.
And it's almost all power wash, so I did a lot of the leg work because it takes a long time to get that stuff slightly clean.
You get a lot of trouble when you use your fish on the same time.
Oh, okay, and as always, assume everything has snails and duckweed. Assume it, because it probably does. 661. There we go.
Alright, y'all can go ahead and bull crap and talk amongst yourselves too, just listen for your number.
You talk about floaters. That's what he meant. Talk
So
about
you have to
floaters.
really work, push your own holes in the top.
682. 682. Congratulations. First time here, right?
Yeah.